What we're going to do in this next example is to take a theme function that already exists, specifically the theme item list function that's in Drupal core, and we're going to add a preprocessing function hook inside of our module. Okay, let's go ahead and begin by going to our module directory and opening up the 6th step, preprocess functions 1. Okay, and go ahead and copy all of this code and paste it over the code in your .module file and save it. Okay, all we've added in this step is this bottom part here. This is an implementation of module preprocess hook. Now, this stands for module, which is our module name, look and feel, and hook is the name of the theme function minus the theme underscore, or the name of the template file. And here's more information about this particular hook if you want to go to api.drupal.org. So the function here, what we're doing is simply returning a value so that we can pause and take a look at the variables variable that gets passed to this function in our debugger. If you look at the function name, we're using our look and feel module name underscore preprocess and then underscore item list, which corresponds to the theme item list function. And the only variable that gets passed to this as a parameter is the variables variable, and it gets passed by reference, which you can tell by this ampersand at the beginning. So that means we don't need to return any value. Instead, this variables item, any changes that we make to it, will be changed in the parent function as well. So what I'm going to do is set a breakpoint here. Now, if you're not familiar with debugging, we talk about it a bit in a few different videos, but the idea is that we're stopping the execution of this code at this point and taking a look at what's going on. In particular, we want to look at what is inside of this variables function. If your editor doesn't support debugging, no problem. You can also use the devel module and several handy functions in there. Or you can use straight up PHP and just use var_dump or printr on this variables variable. Okay, we'll need to go ahead and clear our cache in order to register this preprocessing function. And then I'm going to set my browser to begin a debugging session. So the next time we refresh this page, it will stop at any breakpoints that we've added. So I'm just refreshing the page, and now I'm going to go back to the editor, and we're stopped right here in the middle of this preprocessing function. So we should be able to look at our variables array, and sure enough, here it is in our variables section. So I'm going to expand this variables, and I'm going to expand the items variable inside of that. So variables is an array. You can tell it says type array, and inside of that is an items array, and that contains our items. So as you probably remember from our first example of invoking a theme function, which we did on theme item list, this is the data that we're passing to it. And this is actually our example being passed through a preprocessing function before it launches into the theme function itself. So we have our items, and we have the title, which is null. In our first example, we didn't set a title. Our type, which is UL, and that's the default that's set by the theme item list function, attributes, and theme hook suggestions. Okay, so we know by looking at this what we have to work with, what we could manipulate in the data. So in our next step, we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and end this debugging session here. And go back to your modules folder. And we're going to open up the 7th step, which is preprocess functions 2. Open that up. Go ahead and copy the entire code. I'm going to close out a couple of files here. And paste it into your look and feel.module file, overwriting everything there, just like we've been doing. And save it. Okay, so now what we've added is a fleshing out of our preprocess function. So we've just added these items here. And let me describe quickly what we're doing. So first of all, we're setting the variables type to OL. So what this will do is force any list to be an ordered list, even if it was defined as an unordered list to begin with. Next, we're going to loop through the items and check for any mention of the phrase clear caches, and we're going to turn that into a link. So we're going to loop through the items array because we want to go through each string that was passed that way. And then we're going to reset that item in the array. We do that by grabbing the key in our for each loop and passing that to the variables items array. So this will be in the first iteration of this for each loop, it will be a 0. And then we're going to replace, using string replace PHP function, any mention of clear caches with a link, which we're passing through the link function. And we're not changing the text at all. We're saving the text as clear caches, but we're replacing it with a link to admin config development performance, which is where our clear caches button is. And finally, the third parameter that we're passing to string replace is the original value, which we're also pulling out from this for each loop. Okay, so now when we refresh the page, we already have our preprocess function registered. What will happen is anytime we're using the unordered list, so this will be our first example of using theme item list, it will be converted to an ordered list instead. And next, in our list, there's one mention of clear caches, and that should now be a link, and that will occur in both of our calls to theme item list. So let's go ahead and jump back to our browser and refresh our page. Okay, so now we see that both of our lists are an ordered list, so that's been forced. And we also see our clear caches text has become a link. So this is kind of an arbitrary way to manipulate the settings and data in the variables array. But preprocessing functions can be tremendously valuable, particularly for sanitizing data before it gets to the theming function. So we still want to be able to allow people who are familiar with the theming process to override theme functions, and we can remove a lot of the logic of processing those variables that get passed to it and sanitizing it into preprocessing functions so that the theme function can deal with just the theming part.